Hiya folks, welcome back to the channel, and we're back on with the Vauxhall Zafira. Unfortunately, what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at the rear axle bushes, because unfortunately we've been having a few problems. I've got a bit of a knock coming from the back of the car, and that knock, I think, is coming from the axle bushes. In the previous part, you'll have seen taking a look at the back, checking out if it was something like the shock absorber. So I've been waiting to get the axle bush puller tool up to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can do that by lifting the rear of the car up. We're going to do both sides, and I'm going to show you how to do it without removing the whole axle. So we'll get on with that. We'll show you how to do it. Now, the more observant of you may notice that this isn't a normal video. That's why I'm doing this extra bit of intro, because what I'm going to admit is that I have failed on this video. So the idea was, working on the Vauxhall Zafira, we were going to change the rear axle bushes, and as it turns out, I've not been able to get the old axle bushes out, so I've admitted defeat on this. And I thought it was still useful to do this video, show you the process I was going to do, and you'll see all the way through up to the point where I've got the axle puller fitted and I start to try to pull the old axle bush out, and unfortunately it just doesn't come out. Now, I suspect that these are probably the original factory ones. This is a 2011 car, and basically I don't think they were going to come out. What you probably need to use is an air chisel or something like that to really work at it. Also heat potentially to remove them. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is run the video, and then at the end I'll show you where I think the problem lies, or at least where I got to and what happened, and then we'll call that a day. So enjoy the video. So the car's jacked up and wheels are off. You see jack and axle stands on both sides, keeping it nice and secure. So the general principle of what we're going to do here, first of all, we're going to take the shock absorbers off, which will then allow the whole rear axle to pivot, and we should then be able to take the pressure off and remove the rear springs. That will then allow us a bit more access, a bit more movement, and then the plan is, what we do is we take the bracket that holds the rear bush in. That will then leave this free for us to get on and use the tool and get them out. Now, the reason why we're going to take the bracket off is because I believe we won't be able to withdraw this bolt because of this piece of bodywork here. Because if you look, the bolt is actually quite long. If I crudely measure it like that, there's no way that's going to come out. So what we're going to do is take this bracket off. Again, 3 TORX holds that on, and that'll let us do it. So the first thing, let's get the shock absorbers off. So a couple of TORX, and we'll get those off both sides. Actually thinking about it, I didn't need to completely undo the shock. I could have undone just the top or just the bottom, but never mind, the shock's off now. So what we should find, yeah, there we go, we've got a bit of movement on this one. Might need to undo the other side to get full movement, but we should be able to bounce this and get the spring out. So let's do the other shock on the other side, and then this should come out. Something I didn't mention before that I should have done is you also need to put a jack underneath, because obviously when you release the last arm, the shock absorber I should say, obviously this whole piece will want to drop down, so get a jack underneath ready. You can see where I've put it, just to hold that, and it allows us to move up and down whilst we're doing the work, which is important. And now we just wrestle the springs out. You can see I've put the bolt back in the shock absorber just as an extra precaution, because this is a very heavy assembly, and you can see the springs now can come out. You can also do a quick check on the springs, make sure they're not broken or anything. No, they're all good, they're all intact. Remember which way up they go and how they sit with the cups, so make sure you put them in the right place. Let's go and do the other side, and let's put the shock absorber back on the other side as well for a bit of safety. And now the next job is to get the brackets off. And you can just see one of the brackets at the top here, so we'll use a bit of lubricant on that, again TORX, so we'll crack them loose and we'll see how bad they are. Now here's the thing, so it's an 18 TORX at the front, and then it's a 20 here at the back. So just be aware when you're doing this to make sure you're making a note of all the different sizes and the places that they go. It's not exactly intuitive, is it? And trying to get this without hitting the jack is rather tricky. Let's try another angle. There we go. It's one out. So the back two are E20 TORX, and the front one is an E18. So I'm not going to undo them all. I'm going to go and release the far side first, just to get that loose first before we start undoing them, because once we undo them the whole axle will pivot, remember, back on our shock absorbers, which we've put back in. So it's important that the shock absorbers are there ready to catch the whole weight, otherwise you're going to have the whole axle drop down. Okay, so far side I've undone, so what I'm now going to do is continue and take the bracket off. Now I'm not quite sure what's going to support on what, so I've got a few blocks of wood underneath to hold it. Obviously we've got a jack on the main axle, so in theory it'll all be held also by our shock absorbers. So let's take these off and see how we get on. Okay, you can see we're now loose at the front, so it means we can kind of pivot this down a bit and start to use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the jack that's holding this side of the axle, and hopefully that'll let us flex it a little bit and do what we want. And now, with the other side off, you can see we can now pivot it down, which is just what we want, to be able to get at things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the jack. I'm going to jam a piece in here that's going to keep that held down, which is going to let us take the bracket off completely. So that's ideal. Now this bit's quite important. You can see I've got the cover cap off, but what you need to do is mark the position of it, because on the back there's a V shape. And now we're on to actually pulling this out, and what I've bought is this, which is designed for inserting, but also it's got extra bits to remove these. And the idea is the cup will go on the far side like so, and you can see there's a cutout there for the actual position of the axle, so that fits like that, so it's nice and snug over the top. And then this piece here, if I get the right one, no, I've got the one that's too big. The smaller one will then push and force it through out into this cup. And all you do is you attach the bar, and you can see that's to help them spin a little bit more easily. There's loads of different types of this kit, and they all fit different cars and things like that. But I'll get this one set up and I'll show you it. So here we go, you can see, so I've got a 19 socket on this end and a 19 on the other, resting against the ground as the base. And then all we do is we slowly, and you shouldn't use power tools or anything like that, this needs to go nice and smoothly and straight. So you want to do this manually and just continue through, and what it'll do is it'll push, squeeze these together, and you'll end up with your bearing in the cap here. And so that there is where I got up to with the video, basically. So you saw I had the axle puller fitted, and I was starting to use it, and it just wasn't budging. The if you think these were the replacements that I was going to put in, what you're trying to do is trying to put pressure on this to push it back through. Now it's metal on metal, so it's always going to be tough, but what I think's happened is a form of metal corrosion all around the edges of this had the original jammed well in there. So that's where I think using an air chisel, chiseling away at this to help start it. If it started, I think it would start moving, but it didn't. So I decided before trying too hard and causing more damage, I would stop. Now actually, several things with this puller. Now this isn't a branded puller, this is £60 one that came from Amazon. Now the first thing is, you'll notice that I've had to grind the edges off. Now that's because it didn't quite fit on the axle properly, and that should have started to give me the clue that this may not have been the tool to use. Now I also showed you on it that it had the bolt, and then you had the washer and the bearings. Now you can probably see one of the problems straight away, in that these effectively shattered, as did the washers. So they weren't up to the job. Now I don't know whether that's because there was so much force needed that it just couldn't cope. It might not have been perfectly straight, although I realigned it quite a few times to try to get around that, to make sure, because I did want to make sure that I was doing it properly. So there you go. So I'm not really sure whether this should be attempted as a DIY or whether you need the full garage worth of tools. Now I've seen it done both ways plenty times, and I think I've just been unlucky that these were jammed solid. So there we go. Mark this one up to experience, and it'll be getting booked into the garage. So anyway, do please let me know what you think in the comments, good or bad. I mean, to be honest, we win some, we lose some, and I thought for a change I'll show you where it doesn't quite go according to plan. So there you go. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. Remember to subscribe down the bottom and pop a like as well, even a dislike, because let's face it, it hasn't gone right, has it? So, but we'll be back with some more videos very soon. Thanks for watching.